I got 3 new hellos today. In Malayalam, you say hello. Sounds familiar, but the spelling's quite different. If I were greeting you in Maltese, I would say kif int. And Terry is honoring his grandfather by submitting Zdraviet, which is Bulgarian. I hope I got the pronunciation right on that. I do know how to say howdy Melvin and what's up Jeremiah. Hi, it's Tom from Green Shorts. Thanks for tuning in today. It's a big day because I'm unforming my Aircrete bricks, which have had a little time to cure. One of the things I've been doing this week is watering them 3 or 4 times now. I hit them with a watering can because staying wet is what helps concrete cure. It's interesting to see how much faster this mix absorbed the water as compared to this mix. This was that first batch I did that was, I think, extra foamy, and you can see how it just soaked up that water. Still a little bit of standing water on this, but it is soaking in. Alright, I'm going to grab my impact wrench, head over to the forms, but first I got to thank Patty Hicks for being my latest member. Thank you, Patty. I appreciate the vote of confidence, and I'll see you in the community tab. I'm going to start with these blocks because they're the ones I'm the most concerned about. They're the thinnest at 1.5 inches, and they're also from that first batch, which I think might have been a little bit foamy. I can see a little bit of slumping on these blocks, and in a spot there where I touched it, you can see where that top layer of bubbles has collapsed. So there's also some cracking around the corners of the block with the form in the middle. In this back corner, the crack actually goes all the way through here, so we'll have to see if that's on the surface or if it goes all the way through. I'm going to be as gingerly as possible with this, and we'll see what comes of it. Ooh. I can already tell this doesn't look good. Definitely brittle along these edges. One thing I love about these star drive screws is that I can use them again and again, and they just don't strip out. Alright, so it's holding together, but I think it's just way too brittle for this application, where I do need this particular piece to have a little bit of support. But I am going to set this aside and let it cure some more and see if that helps. I don't think so. One thing I will say is that the forms seem to be separating pretty nicely. So the oil was definitely a good release agent. I'm going to be a little bit more brutal with this piece just so we see how fragile it is in this state. So yes, I was right, too foamy. I am going to go ahead and set this form back up and recast these pieces, and I'm going to use a slightly different technique. Alright, form 2. These first 3 blocks were from that same pour, the foamy pour. I'm interested to see if the fact that these are twice as thick might actually allow this to be workable. These two were from a subsequent pour. I think this mix is going to work out just fine, but we won't know until I get them out of the forms. Looks like perhaps this block could work. I think it needs a little more cure time. I'm going to be assembling this rocket stove in a couple of days, so I'll let this cure a little bit more and we'll see if it's usable. Still a little bit airy in my mind, and brittle along these top edges, perhaps where the air got to those bubbles. It's interesting, there's actually a gray layer here on the top where the consistency looks different. That seems to be what's flaking off. This could just be a curing thing too, where this has been exposed to the sunlight. I don't know if that's a factor or not. Definitely tighter on the bubbles. They still have that gray layer on the top there. A few inconsistencies here, but this feels a lot more substantial. I'm not going to try and snap this in half though, because I probably could. Definitely nice consistency here. Again, these top corners are brittle, but I've got a nice crisp edge here on these corners, and that can be the outside of the rocket stove. This can go inside where it's not seen, and that'll be fine. Definitely an advantage of having a square block to work with, so I can choose the nicest face to face out. I'm also leaving the longest spine on my forms here, and I'll leave these blocks like this so I can just stack them back in if I want to reuse these. Alright, let's try some now that we're of that chunkier mix, where I added in some dry cement to the mix once I realized it was too foamy. You can definitely tell it's a little bit more gritty. So this is an interesting block. I think it has two consistencies in it. I actually poured a few of them to finish up a mix and then topped them off with the next batch. So this may be one of those. You can see the layers in here, but this definitely feels fairly consistent. It's got kind of a little roughness on the top here. Oop. So it definitely broke apart a little bit when I dressed that top. That's probably something I could have done while it was still a little more green. If I caught that early enough, I would be able to just kind of rub off the rough spots there. Again, still usable. Got my nice clean edges here. And you can see by the color here, this is still pretty damp from the last time I added water. Nice consistency here. I'm not gonna mess with the top on that. I think it's still a little bit brittle. But clearly this one was poured from the same batch. Alright, I'm gonna unform some of the small blocks now. You can see with these that I actually did come in and rub that top down to get rid of some of the roughness, at least on these 5. I didn't do these 3. Thought I'd do those later, but so something as simple as that, just to knock off some of those high spots. Nice block. Again, got the gray layer there. May just be having some oxidation happening faster with the foam that's exposed to the sunlight. Don't know, may have to try covering that up. But again, a nice crisp corners on this block. Hey, train's here. Good timing. I gotta get down there and show you guys the train. I promise I'll do that by the end of the month. Alright, those are all my blocks. I'm gonna do a quick dry stack on these just to see how they go together. The grill would go in this layer with 2 more 8.5 inch blocks to complete the firebox. So I do need to make at least 1 more of these size blocks to have a respectable height on this riser. Perhaps for the purpose of my test, I'll use this one here in the back. I'm going to let these cure for a couple more days. I'm also going to recast the base and the piece that goes on top of the firebox. And then I'll do the assembly with some fireplace mortar. I'm going to rebuild a couple of forms this morning and use 2 different methods for making quote-unquote Aircrete that don't involve the foam. Reason being is I don't have time to let this cure enough in order to fire this later today. The last piece I made to cap off the firebox was actually 8.5 by 8.5. When I did the dry stack on the stove, I realized that I needed the full 8.5 by 11 to cover the fire tunnel. So instead of a piece like this, I'm going to have that full 8.5 by 11. I still, of course, want the opening in this position so it fits right. So here are my 3 secret ingredients. I could do this with the Portland cement, but it won't set fast enough. However, this castable refractory cement will. But replacing the foam, I'm going to use 2 different aggregates. One is lava rock. In fact, this is kind of nature's Aircrete. It's got little air pockets in there, nice and light. My second aggregate is, you've probably seen on my channel, which is perlite. Perlite is an expanded mineral, very lightweight. This will create those same air pockets that we get from the Aircrete. Obviously these bubbles of air, if you will be bigger. Those are my 2 non-foam Aircrete methods. Let's see how they go. I could use straight castable refractory cement to make these blocks, but this stuff is expensive. I'm going to use aggregates to mix in with this to reduce the amount of cement I need to use. I used a little bit of the refractory cement before I added the lava rock just to smooth out the top here. Alright, I actually poured this a little bit thinner, maybe an inch thick versus the 1.5 inches. That's all the lava rock that I had. But I am curious to see if this inch thickness works as well as the 1.5 inches. I did add an armature to this since it will be the base of the whole thing. It will need to be the most structural element of all of this. That is one benefit of having this with some lava rock and refractory cement in there. Just this will be more structural than the straight up Aircrete will. Alright, one last brick to make, which is the refractory cement and perlite brick. It does not take a whole lot of water to hydrate this cement. So far I've had to come back and thicken it up with some extra cement. Let's see if I can get it right the first time. A little wetter than ideal, but I think it's going to work fine because I'm going to be adding a lot of perlite to it. So this slurry will be fine. If I were just going to cast this by itself, I think I would have wanted it a little thicker than this, but I'm not going to try and thicken it up because it'll just get too thick. Of course, now what I have done is add too much perlite. I think perhaps that first scoop would have been enough. Oh well. So now I'm gonna have to add some more refractory. The thing about the perlite is it will absorb a lot of water. I'm gonna mix some more water in here first and see if perhaps that's the solution. I think it's going to need a little bit more refractory. All right, I'm going to pour it in the form. Alright, all of my replacement blocks are poured. Now I'm going to let these set up. Alright, I've let these cure for several hours, and they're not quite ready to build with yet, but I'm going to go ahead and take them out of the forms. Wish me luck. Definitely too soon to move these, and I don't think I'm going to try and take this out just yet. Too soon to go any further with these as well. Yeah, it's dark. I've let this stuff set as long as I can. I'm gonna go ahead and try and get the forms off here, at least the center form. I'm hoping it's cured enough. The directions call for a 24-hour cure on this before firing. This has got about 10 hours on it. I'm happy I've got that armature inside. I'm a little more concerned about this block coming out. I've got an idea. After a few minutes of torching, I noticed some cracks forming. My hope with heating the block was that it was going to dry it out and cause it to shrink, but I think the heat might have expanded it and caused these cracks. See a crack, 2 cracks. Shoot. Well, train's here. At least that's a good thing. Well, after all the fun I had trying to burn this thing out, the block broke. But all is not lost, because I'm going to just treat this as 3 separate blocks. It's about to crack right here, which will release the block, which I will not touch because it's still got embers on it. Because I'm going to put this thing together with stove mortar, I'm just going to glue this back together. The lesson for me here and the lesson for you is make sure you leave enough time for your cement to cure. This asked for 24 hours. I gave it less than half of that, and clearly that wasn't enough. I also probably could have helped myself by putting a band of cardboard or something around that block. That would have made it much easier for that to get out. The block swelled up with water, and it made it really difficult to get it out. I probably could have helped myself as well by putting an armature in this block as well, but I did not do that. You know how I work on this channel. I'm going to show you when something doesn't go as planned so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I do. I'm also optimistic that I can make this work. The verdict on the perlite and refractory cement blocks is I'm not sure yet. It's pretty crumbly still, and I don't want to even try and pull these apart yet. I forgot that I actually had an extra block of Aircrete that I had cast in a carton. It's a little wider than the dimension that I need, but it's exactly 2 inches tall. So I'll be able to use this as the extra block that I need to finish out this rocket stove. I love it when a plan comes together. Alright, so I've moved all my parts back here to rocket stove row, and I've got a vacancy where the rocket stove that's now on the back porch used to live. So the Aircrete rocket stove is going to go right here, but let me clear that spot out. Unfortunately, my standard ashtray for all of my other rocket stoves won't fit this one, so I will make one though, because it's been a nice thing to have to be able to slide out the ashes once the fire's out and cold. Going to be assembling the stove with this 2000 degrees Fahrenheit fireplace mortar. I'm going to assemble the stove, starting with my base, which I'm actually going to put with the dimpled side down. Give me a nice smooth plane here to start with. The next layer is going to be the grill, which I'll set in a healthy bed of mortar. This is a salvaged grill grate. Got a piece of concrete siding here that I'm going to sit in the back here to fill in the gap so my blocks are level. Now I'm going to put on my pieces of the firebox cover, which I'll just mortar together. That is going to work just fine. Gonna use my odd size brick in the back there, just so it's out of sight. Alright, the stove is built. And this mortar is actually heat cured, so I'm gonna light this thing up. I will come back and replace that back brick later once I have a chance to cast some more like this. And then I'll probably finish this out with a skim coat of cement to kind of tidy it up a little bit. I want to see how these blocks perform first. If any of them blow up or fall apart, I will rebuild before I skim coat. Here you can see the Aircrete rocket stove next to its cousin, the fire brick rocket stove. Alright, because this is still a little bit green, there's still some water tied up in the refractory cement, so, and probably in the Aircrete blocks as well. So I'm gonna do a smaller burn to start this out. Drafty nicely. A little bit of fire out the top. That's a nice rocket. Alright, so I think I'm gonna let this burn out now. And overall, I'm pleased with how the Aircrete is performing. Even with that hot fire in there, I really don't feel much heat through this block. It tells me that the Aircrete is insulating well. So I'll test this a few more times before I decide it's ready to be skim coated. and I'll make sure and put a photo of the final product in the community tab. Special thanks to my patrons and members for making these videos possible. I appreciate the support. As always, my mission here at GreenShortz is to help you see green so you can be green and save a little green by doing it yourself. A rocket stove is green because I'm using found fuel and I'm burning it efficiently. And in this case, we got super insulation with Aircrete. Keep all the great comments and suggestions coming. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I'll see you next Saturday.